The 2026 regulations seem to be a very troublesome topic for Red Bull, with Horner constantly asking for changes due to the fact that the Austrian team fears will have Frankenstein formulas all over the grid. But after Wolff's recent statement, Red Bull's request has been shut down. This is a very interesting development, considering the fact that Red Bull are not huge fans of where the sport is headed, and initial rumours were that the team is now struggling to keep up the pace with Mercedes and Ferrari from 2026 onwards, a scenario that will likely see a new pecking order being set in place from the next massive shakeup waiting for us. Join us now as we go through the recent development of events between Red Bull and Mercedes, how furious Horner is about his request not being granted, and what Wolff's statement is that aggravated this entire situation. Formula One is headed into a new era from 2026 onwards, with the electrification of its engines and the implementation of a fully sustainable fuel on the cars. Furthermore, the focus has been on bringing a lot more power from the electrical unit of the car and the removal of the MGU-H, with these 2 points being the leaders of the revolution that is set to come upon us 3 years from now. And as everything always is in Formula One, testing has already started, and we're going to see some massive shakeups in the pecking order from the initial statements made by Horner and his team. After the initial testing, Horner has been very vocal about his displeasure with the 2026 versions of the cars, and he's fired a warning across the entire grid that a number of chassis compromises need to be made in order to make the new powertrains feasible, which suggests that changes would need to be made in the rules from the original writing. This is a very bold statement from the Brit, considering that every team boss has participated in the writing of these rules. But why is the team that is dominating so much right now scared that they're going to miss the goal with the new technical regulations? Just like it happened with Mercedes, downfalls are part of the sport, and it's the job of every team that's on top to keep it for as long as they can. Mercedes managed to do that for 7 straight years, only losing out on the Drivers' Championship in 2021, the last year before the massive technical shakeup. And it seems like Red Bull are going to drop the ball, as they've just entered a new partnership with Ford for 2026. Therefore, Horner's statement could be understood as a great fear that Red Bull is struggling a lot with the new regulations, and if rumours are to be believed, they're far behind in the engine department program as well, with Ferrari and Mercedes leading the way in this sector. So one couldn't help but understand the lobbying that Horner made towards the FIA, but is it one that will be granted? And what does Wolff have to say about this matter? When talking about the potential threats for 2026, Horner hasn't held back words, as he went on to say, "We need to ensure that we're not creating a technical Frankenstein, which will require the chassis to compensate to such a degree with movable aero and reduce the drag to such a level that the racing will be affected, and that there will be no tow effect and no DRS, because effectively you're running like that at all points in time." However, the compensation that Horner is talking about hasn't been mentioned by any other team principal out there, and just like Wolff said, Horner's statements are coming at a time when Red Bull has been played a bit by Honda, which is why they decided to go their own way once the new regulations started, and have signed the contract with Ford as their engine badger. But the technical regulations in 2026 are one of the main reasons why companies like Ford and Audi were lured back into the sport, and why Honda decided to stay after playing a hot and cold game with Red Bull, one that could have cost the team way more than we originally thought. It is without doubt that Verstappen has the talent to bring the car where it needs to be, but if the car is not in the optimum performance window, then there's only so much that the two-time world champion can do in tough times. According to Wolff, nothing will change for 2026, and he has no idea why this topic is being brought up all over again, just to add some stir and drama for the fans out there, as the Austrian is a firm believer that if Red Bull wants to make a solid step forward, then they need to be making changes in their garage and not lobbying the FIA. A bit of an interesting statement from Wolff, considering the fact that whenever something went wrong for Mercedes, it was him and Hamilton that asked the FIA to modify the rules or to prevent the teams from working on their next year's car until a certain period of time, when during their dominance they were able to throw in as much money as they wanted in order to make the car more competitive and therefore squash the entire competition before the season even started. But be that as it may, Formula One is an ever-changing sport, and nothing would delight us more to see closer racing even before 2026, when Audi is to enter the sport. Wolff went on to destroy Horner's request for a revision of the 2026 technical regulations, adding, "That is not going to happen. Zero chance." Capital letters. So I don't know why these things are coming up. We've developed these regulations over many years, with all the auto manufacturers being involved. It was a compromise that attracted Audi to finally join the sport and for Honda to stay in there. So this is the best possible case that one could imagine for Formula One. Is it challenging when designing our chassis and saying, how are we going to do this here? Yes, but there is zero chance anything is coming. These regulations are not going to change anymore. They're not going to be postponed anymore because the world needs to show innovation around sustainability. We need to reduce emissions, and we're super excited. This is just part of the plan for Formula One to be as self-sustainable as possible, and new measurements are coming even prior to 2026, when the tyre blanket ban aimed at saving electricity and the new qualifying format that could save up to 3,600 individual tyres per year if it shows to be a successful experiment in Hungary and Monza. Therefore, whether or not Horner agrees with how his car is currently acting in the experiments, that is for his engineers to fix and not the FIA, as there are other team bosses who have expressed their disagreement with Horner's statements. Ottmar Schaffnauer, who is now one of the most experienced team principals out there and is currently serving his role in Alpine, feels like there is no need to talk about this matter because everything that has been agreed upon has been properly suggested and discussed by him and his colleagues. So if any team is struggling to meet the deadline or the criteria of their own work, that's up to them to fix and not the governing body of the sport. But if you are Red Bull, you certainly have some perks in trying to lobby the governing body and make certain changes that would favour your team more than the rest of the grid. Something that Horner is desperately trying to make right now in a bid to keep Verstappen longer than 2028, as the Dutchman has threatened to leave the sport once his contract is up due to the constant changes that are being applied to it. Even though Schaffnauer didn't attend the meetings of the powertrain guys at Alpine, he believes that his team is on the right path and therefore changes won't be applied for 2026 because, from what he spoke about with his team and the rest of the grid, there isn't any particular need to change the 2026 regulations just because a team has reportedly fallen behind in the development path. What this goes to show is that every team that is currently dominating could be down in a matter of one regulation change, and if we're to see Red Bull struggle from 2026 onwards, then it's safe to say that the regulations have worked wonders. If we are to isolate Verstappen from the top in 2023, I would say that the budget cap and the latest technical regulations in 2022 are working as well. But what I don't understand is why Red Bull would be asking the FIA to make changes 3 years before the engine and chassis of their car are to hit the tarmac, when there is still enough time to make the perfect car with the perfect engineers behind the curtains. Has the deal with Honda and the hot and cold games from the Japanese manufacturer really brought the end of the domination of Red Bull, who are yet to see whether Ford has what it takes to continue the championship march with them?